You're listening to the Jōrni Podcast. Could small shifts in your mindset completely transform the way you connect with others? Stay tuned to explore more. This episode contains adult subject matter and some listeners may be triggered by this content. Listener discretion is advised. Hi, I'm Petra Brunbauer, and with decades of experience with sadness, pain, anxiety, and stress, I finally figured out how to leave all that behind. And this podcast shows you how to break free permanently so you can reclaim your sanity and find the self-esteem and energy to go after the life you desire. With real talk about mental health, holistic healing, and the tough journey of coming out the other end. This is the Jōrni Podcast. Welcome to today's episode. In this episode, we explore what it takes to build healthy, fulfilling relationships, both with ourselves and with others. Our guest shares insights on communication, boundaries, and the patterns that shape the way we connect, helping us understand how small shifts can lead to deeper, more meaningful connections. Tannaz Hosseinpour is a certified life coach specializing in relationships both with oneself and with others, as well as conscious manifestation. With an academic background in conflict resolution law and counseling psychotherapy, she combines these diverse skills to empower individuals to create meaningful connections and manifest their desired reality. Let's meet Tannaz Hosseinpour. Hi, Tannaz. It's so great to have you on the podcast today. I've been looking forward to getting to chat with you because cultivating healthy relationships, I feel, is something that all of us can benefit from, especially in this world where many people don't live in the same place or live across different continents even. So I feel it's even more important to cultivate those relationships in your lives. So thank you so much for joining me today and welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Petra, for having me on. I'm excited to have this conversation together.
Yeah, absolutely. And share a little bit about yourself to start us off with, because we're always curious who our guest is and especially how your story connects to what it is that you do today. How did you get into working with the relationships? What brought you to this point? So share a little bit with our listeners how that all came together.
Of course. So my background was actually in dispute resolution law, and I then went into family mediation, and all of that is about divorce and separation. And I really didn't like the energy. It was very strange for me. Like, how did we go from being so madly in love to this point of, I hate you, we're fighting over who gets a plate, who gets a cup? It was a really reflective moment for me of, this is not something aligned with the energy of the work that I want to do. And I was living in Dubai at the time, and I had a book club because I love to read. So one of the girls in the book club said, hey, have you ever considered coaching? Because she knew I'm really deep into psychology and spirituality. And I was like, I have no idea what that is. This is like 2016, 2017. So I looked into it. I got trained and I was like, okay, if I had to niche down on a topic, what would it be? And it was always relationships because I didn't like being on the reactive side of it. I was like, I would love to be on the proactive side, helping people cultivate healthy relationships to prevent those major ruptures. And even if they do want to separate, how can we do it in a conscious uncoupling, as we call it, in a safe way, in a softer way? So that started the journey around 8 years ago. And then 3 years ago, I decided to go back to school for my third master's degree, but this time in counseling psychotherapy, just so that I would have the therapeutic skills and tools available to further help my couples. So that's how it turned out, from a very reactive approach to a proactive one.
Amazing. Thank you for sharing that. And you've certainly done a lot of academia to come to this point. And yeah, I feel like there's a lot of skills that you have gathered in working with couples on that as well. I'm kind of curious for you coming from that law background and seeing sort of the ugly side of when relationships fall apart. Is it always possible for people to work together in a better way or to work together in a more respectful and conscious way? In your experience working with couples, is this something that all of us can work on, or are there sometimes situations when things do fall apart beyond where we can step in and help?
This is something that has been researched on by the Gottman Institute, and their research found that most problems can be solved, especially if you're working with a professional who is trained in relationships, except three areas that they found. The first area is abuse. So if there's physical abuse present and it's not an isolated offense situation, something that's happening over and over again. The second is when one of the parties struggles with addiction, but they're not willing to acknowledge it or to work on it. And the third is when they have significantly different beliefs around fundamental points, such as having children. One wants kids and one doesn't. In their experience, these are the three that it's hard to solve them and sometimes not even recommended to solve them unless there's major change happening. For abuse, like the abuser is really working on themselves and the relationship is safe enough for the parties to return and they're both willing to rebuild. And for the addiction, the person who is addicted, for them to go and get the help. And again, the relationship is safe for them to continue. But when two parties have significantly different views on children, that becomes really difficult. We always say, like, it's important to choose someone, to entertain someone that has similar values, similar lifestyle, and similar vision for the future.
That makes a lot of sense when you explain it in that manner, because certain things we can compromise on, and certainly it's healthy for us to do so in some situations. But yeah, when it comes to these fundamental things, as you call them, and our personal safety and our personal health, then obviously there are other things that we need to consider as well. So, what kinds of things do you work with your clients on? Is there anything in particular that you run across more often than other things, or things that come up in the discussions that are more broad topics that you can say, oh, okay, I see most of my clients running into this issue? What are the things that you work on?
Yeah, great question. So, usually when it comes to the success of a relationship, there's three elements to it. There's me, you, and us. When it comes to me and you, it's 50% the inner work, 50% doing the inner work of becoming aware of our triggers, our baggage, our wounds, how we respond to these triggers, wounds, and baggages, which we all have, and becoming aware of who am I? Why am I the way I am? And 50% is relational skills, which majority of us were not taught. We weren't taught in school how to communicate. We weren't taught in school conflict resolution. We weren't taught in school how to show and experience different types of intimacy. So it's like 50% inner work, 50% skills. And three areas that I would say I see the most is one, couples learning how to communicate their needs and expectations, game changer. Two, couples learning how to fight fair. So, how can we fight in a way that's respectful, that doesn't break the boundaries of respect, and still there's relational safety present? And third one is, how can I be intentional with how I am loving you? Intimacy comes in, love languages come in, and all these other, again, small little skills, consistent daily effort comes in. I would say the three areas would be communicating wants and expectations, learning how to fight fair, and learning how to show love in a way that your partner sees love, not in a way that you see love.
Yeah, that can be quite a different perspective there. Now that you point that out, I think there might be some aha moments there for listeners who might be in those situations, either experiencing on their end, saying, well, my partner thinks they're expressing this in a loving way, but I disagree, or the other way around. So, really great points. And I think almost something universal in many relationships that couples can definitely relate to. Now, let's unpack this a little bit, because you mentioned a few really interesting points. You mentioned different types of intimacy. So tell us a little bit about, what do you mean by types of intimacy, and what kind of types are there? Because, yeah, I think probably myself included, well, okay, we're either intimate or we're not. I had no idea there's different types. So let's break that down. What are the different types?
Yeah. So when we usually say intimate, people usually think physical, sexual, that sexual intimacy that you're having with your partner. But intimacy actually is broken down into 6 different categories. And what we need to become aware of is we can't expect our partner to fulfill all 6 all the time consistently. It's too much of a pressure to put on someone. It's too much of a pressure for someone to put on us. And as Esther Perel says, we are at a time in life where there has never been this many expectations on a partner than ever before. Like in the past, your partner was the breadwinner, the father of your kids. Now it's like, no, you need to be my best friend. You need to be my supporter. You need to be my confidant. You need to be my lover. So many expectations. So we want to kind of break it down and show, okay, how does human nature see intimacy? So we have physical intimacy, which is non-sexual touch. We're holding hands, we're kissing each other's cheeks, maybe we're hugging. Again, non-sexual touch. Then we have sexual intimacy, which is that sexual touch. We have emotional intimacy. Who do you feel safe to talking about your emotions, expressing your feelings in a safe, non-judgmental space? Then we have intellectual intimacy. It is who is intellectually stimulating you, having those conversations about, I don't know, politics, history, fashion, anything that is intellectually stimulating. 5th, we have spiritual intimacy. Now, spiritual intimacy is both like who are you having these spiritual experiences with? And also, who are you talking about your beliefs and your value systems with? And lastly, experiential intimacy. Who are you having life experiences with? Going to a new restaurant, traveling with? Ideally, of course, we want to have all 6 with our partner, but we have to realize that because our partner can't fulfill all our needs all the time, who else do we have in our community, in our circle that can fill those tanks when our partner doesn't have the capacity? Or maybe we don't even want to have that experience with our partner. For some couples I work with, they're like, you know what, my spiritual intimacy I want to have with my girlfriends. Or people are like, oh, my intellectual intimacy, I want to just have it with my coworkers. But the goal is here to sit down, and this is an activity I love to do, break down these 6 and ask yourself who is in each category. Now, for those in a monogamous relationship, sexual category will only have their partner. For those in non-monogamous relationships, they might have more people. The list is really going to look different for everyone, but we want to be intentional with the people in our life. Like, okay, that friend of mine, great experiential intimacy together, but she's not my go-to person for emotional intimacy. Great. Now I have awareness of which one of my needs this friend fulfills for me. I'm going to remove the expectation that she needs to be everything for me, because this concept applies to both romantic and platonic friendships and relationships. Vice versa. What tank am I filling for someone else? Am I filling their intellectual? Am I filling their emotional, their physical? So it really brings insights into how people are filling our cups and how we're filling their cups. And it removes that pressure of you have to be everything for me all the time.
That's a really great way of looking at that. And there's definitely several categories in there that I wasn't aware of. So thank you for sharing that. As you're explaining these different categories, I'm almost looking at this as Maslow's hierarchy a little bit. So that the physical, the intimate and non-intimate touch, for example, are definitely things you want in your relationship, because if those aren't there, I feel like some of the basics might be lacking. And the same with this emotional intimacy. But some of the others almost feel like they could be part of a self-actualization or something a little bit higher, like the spiritual intimacy and things like that, that you could develop even if your partner couldn't fulfill that, as you said. But what happens if your partner can't fulfill even the more basic sort of intimacies, as the hugging, the kissing, the sexual intimacy, maybe even the emotional intimacy? Does that cause friction in relationships if the partner can't fulfill some of those basic ones?
If it is a non-negotiable for that person, we have couples that sexual is not a priority because they might be asexual. They might have different beliefs around sexual. Their culture plays a big role into this. Religion plays a big role into this. If it is a non-negotiable for them, if they feel like this is something I want and I need and it's not there, then It's very common they come into a session and we get curious with what is the resistance for you showing up the way your partner wants to show up. When there's resistance around physical, there sometimes is an underlying trauma around bodily safety. Do I feel safe in my own body? With sexual, there often is a lot of beliefs around what is appropriate, what isn't. What does a good girl do? What does a gentleman do? And different beliefs, because we are human beings in the same family. Siblings in the same family are different, let alone people from different families, different beliefs, different environments, parents. We come with a set of beliefs. We think people see the world the same way we do, but they don't. And that's something we really need to normalize and become curious with. Of, tell me how you see the world. Help me understand. Being curious to where that resistance is, even with emotional. If I don't feel like the world is a safe place, I'm going to have my guards up. Now comes in someone who wants me to express my emotions. I might want to, but I don't know how. So then the goal of that therapeutic alliance becomes, how can we start to cultivate a feeling of safety in myself, in the relationship, in the world that I live in, to express my emotions? It is something that couples can work on if they're both committed to.
That's really good to hear that, because I know you mentioned skills before that we often don't get taught. So I'm really hoping that a lot of these things are things that we can learn if we're interested. And of course, there will be times when our partner is not interested in learning those things. But for example, if we come to a situation where we both say this is important to us, but we don't have the skills, it would be then a good time to see someone like yourself to maybe learn how we can better work on that, or some skills that we're lacking to express ourselves in a way that's safe for the other person. So that's really good to hear that we don't need to be born with all of this knowledge. We can actually acquire this as we move through our relationship and as we grow together. Really, really important. Now, you touched on the fact that some people don't see the world in the same way that we do, which is a normal thing, but can also cause some friction in relationships and, of course, some fights. And you did mention that fighting fair is an important skill that we should probably learn if we're in relationships. So what does that mean to fight fair? And what are the things that we should be aware of in order to accomplish something like that? Because, of course, in the heat of the moment, we might not all be thinking very logically about what all the steps that we're supposed to be doing in this time. So how can we fight fair in our relationships?
Love that question. But before I answer that, I just want to add an asterisk to the previous question. There will be times, and you mentioned it, like, what if one person is invested and one person isn't? I have seen so much success with that as well, because sometimes when we change the way we approach our partner's response changes. Even if your partner is not on board on doing the work, you doing the work changes you. And oftentimes that change inspires relational change. So I also want to say, if your partner is like, I don't want to go get help, or I'm not interested in this program, that's totally fine. You doing the work really can elevate your experience in that relationship. That's that. I wanted to just add that for hope, so no one feels discouraged if they're like, my partner's not on the same page. But fighting fair ultimately is, how can we both feel safe expressing our emotions in a non-judgmental way, meaning that you're not going to use this against me in the future. I can bring my concern to you and you will listen to me and you will understand me. It means that when I'm speaking, you're listening to understand. You're not listening to respond, and vice versa. I am listening to actually hear your experience. What that actually looks like in practice is, we only talk when we're both in a regulated nervous system space. If we're feeling dysregulation, so in that heat of that moment where the heart rate goes up, you're sweating, all you see is blood in front of you, and you want to hurt the other person, you pause the conversation. You or your partner, one of you will pause the conversation and say, I want to hear you out, but right now you're screaming. I have to remove myself from the situation. Or, I'm getting really aggravated. I'm getting really frustrated. Let's call a timeout. So when we call a timeout, we go our separate ways. Before I mention that, it's important for you to tell the partner that you're calling a timeout, and you don't just storm out the room, because especially if your partner has an anxious attachment style and you just walk out, they're going to feel more and more nervous and anxious. We don't want to cause that kind of pain and suffering on our partner, we want to say, listen, time out. You can use a word in your relationship like tea, hand signal, pause, apples, whatever you want it to be. You've communicated that together. You've called the timeout. You're both going your separate ways. And for a minimum of like 20 minutes, you want to grab a glass of cold water, splash ice on your wrists or in the back of your neck where your vagus nerve is. You want to take some slow, deep breaths. You want to literally shake it off. You want to use different tools that you can use as an activation for this parasympathetic nervous system. Now, when you're both feeling regulated, you come back to the conversation. You say, help me understand your perspective. This is how I'm seeing it. Am I getting it right? Again, these are tools. These are not statements we've been taught in school. Help me be better. What do you need from me? How can I support you? What do we need to move forward as a team? Powerful, powerful reminder. It's not me versus you. It's us versus the problem. And if we can be a team and hold that energy, that team energy, we can navigate these issues. But two things I would say is take as many pauses as you need and be intentional with the pause. Use the pause for regulation. Don't use the pause to again go like, and start ruminating on those thoughts and figuring out this is what I'm going to say. This is going to be my response. No, your pause is just for you to help you regulate. Put all your focus on your nervous system. And the second thing is we're not in a courtroom. When you come back to the conversation, really set an intention to understand the other person instead of trying to prove a point so that you win. Because the goal is we both win. If I win and you lose, the relationship loses. Both need to come out feeling some sense of, I feel heard and understood. And you can understand and validate someone without agreeing with them. And this is a big thing too. It's like sometimes people are like, no. If I validate their feelings, it means I'm agreeing with it, but it's so irrational. You don't need to agree with it. You just need to say, I understand how you're feeling. It's valid how you're feeling. And it's like water on fire. It just melts that anger, that resentment, or whatever that is coming up, that frustration away. So we want to validate our partner. We want them to feel understood, and we want to do it when we're both feeling regulated.
There's a lot of things in there that I feel we never get taught, including a lot of the nervous system regulation and taking those pauses, because you're quite right. When people walk away in the middle of a conversation, it can be very panic inducing because in the back of your head, you're thinking, oh my goodness, now the relationship's over. They're walking out, they're leaving, they're never coming back. So really important to communicate. If you are going to try this out, that you communicate this in advance. Obviously, you make a plan, like you said, and you both are on the same page that, okay, now we're going to take that break. And I can see this saving a lot of relationships in a sense that you say some things that just simply can't be taken back in these moments. So taking that pause, making sure you're looking after yourself, and then you come back in a very different headspace after that. I feel like that can have such a huge impact, and that you have a sort of line that you just don't cross in relationships. And when you're in the heat of the moment, that line often gets crossed with throwing things in the other person's face just because that comes up at the moment. So I see this as a really, really great tool and a really helpful thing to do in actually keeping that relationship in a really respectful place, because most of these things we get so emotional because we have so much love invested in a relationship. We are so emotionally invested, and it's hard then to heal some of those things that we throw out in the moment when we're angry. So yeah, better to actually take that pause and see if you can. I feel like this can be explained and it can be learned, even if you do have a partner that is a bit hesitant around someone just kind of walking out of the room. It can be explained, and maybe you could even set a timer and say, okay, after 20 minutes, I'll be back, or after 30 minutes, I'll be back. Don't worry, here's the timer. I'm not going far. I'm just going in the next room. But even then, we're creating that pause that I think really would make a huge difference in a relationship. So thank you for putting that out there. And I hope our listeners kind of found a bit of an aha moment here as well in the value of taking that pause to just even look after yourself when you're stepping away and making sure that you come back in a much more regulated space. Is this something that partners can practice together, this nervous system regulation? I feel like we could all benefit from knowing a little bit more about that because in the heat of the moment, like I said, we don't think of things like that. So how can partners practice that together, maybe co-regulating or working on that nervous system regulation?
Yeah, definitely. What we need to realize is people can take pauses, and it doesn't mean that they don't love us. You can love someone and dislike them in the moment. Sometimes I'll tell my partner, I love you, but I'm really disliking you right now. So I need to take a break so I can gather my thoughts and come back in a more softer, so I can understand you better. Because when we're dysregulated, and this is important, when we're dysregulated, the part of our brain that processes new information shuts down. So I actually can't even understand or hear what you're saying. So it goes one ear and comes out the other. So it's a useless conversation at that point. Nothing is going to get resolved. Yes, co-regulation is so powerful, but in order to get to co-regulation, we need to know some of the basics of self-regulation. I actually have a free ebook on this on my website that you can download with 11 tools for nervous system regulation. These are practices that you can do on your own to just kind of understand how the breath impacts it, how different tools. Another one that I love to do, and I ask my clients to start with, is to kind of wear a rubber band around their arms. And when they notice that their heart rate goes up throughout the day, and this translates to if there was a conflict throughout the day as well, to kind of just pull it. And that sensation, that pull, they start to associate that pull, that feeling to pausing. So when they notice their heart rate goes up, they'll pull it, and that will be like cue for a timeout. And they'll practice this throughout the day. So if they're driving and they notice they're getting aggravated, they'll pull it. If they're in a meeting and they get triggered, they'll pull it. They'll constantly pull it. And you will notice after a week that your wrist might be red from the amount of times that you pulled it from being dysregulated. But it sends a signal to the brain, break. So we associate that pain to that break. And then with that break, we become really intentional, learning these, again, just going through that list. Let me try this one out. You want to set yourself up for success. You want to have as many tools in your toolbox so that you have something for every time. So maybe I'm in a meeting and I'm dysregulated. I can't do meditation in that moment, but I can do silent breath work where I'm breathing through the nose, not the mouth. No one can tell what I'm doing, but internally, I'm taking slow, deep breaths, or I'm counting numbers. So, counting, maybe if I'm in a boardroom, counting the number of pens, and that again will regulate me. Or I'm at dinner, maybe I can get up, excuse myself, go to the washroom, splash some cold water in my face. So, you want to have these very simple tools, but are super practical when practiced consistently. And both of us are doing it, then we come into as a couple. So again, it's me, you, and then it's us. And co-regulation is hold my hand, let's breathe together. I love you, let's just take a break. Let's hold hands, let's breathe. Or let me give you a hug. I say let's put co-regulation as step 2. Let's do self-regulation as step 1. And that's something we can build on, because for co-regulation to take place, one party needs to be regulated. But at the beginning, if we don't know any of these tools, both parties are dysregulated.
Yeah, great insight. And again, hopefully a lot of big moments for our listeners as well, listening in and maybe recognizing some of these challenges from their own relationships. And with you offering a lot of insight on how we can approach this, where we can start with ourselves and then bringing that into the relationship and then working on that together. So yeah, wonderful for laying that out in a way that makes it really easy to understand how we can work with our partners on a better relationship. So thank you for all of that. Now, if our listeners are curious and they've enjoyed our conversation and they want to work on their own relationships, how can they get a hold of you? How can they work with you? What kind of programs and services do you offer?
Thank you. They can find me on minutesongrowth.com. Over there, I have 2 master classes that they can just purchase and watch on demand. One is on conflict resolution, like how to fight fair. And one is on emotional intimacy, because intimacy, 6 tanks, but emotional on its own is a whole world. All of them are their whole world. So I have one on emotional intimacy. They can work one-on-one with me, solo or as a couple. I also have a program called Manifesting Love. It runs twice a year. It's for women, kind of doing the foundation of the self-love and self-acceptance and self-worth, which then translates into their relationships. And yeah, I also have a podcast myself, Minutes on Growth, where I share very short solo episodes. And I also have guests, but that's another free content, and as well as the free ebook on nervous system regulation that's on my website that they can access.
Amazing. And we will, of course, be linking to all of Tannaz's offerings in the show notes as well. So be sure to check there on how you can connect with her, how you can get the ebook. And of course, you can listen in from your favorite podcast provider and to Minutes on Growth, which is her podcast. I'm sure there's a lot of valuable nuggets there that you can find in addition to the conversation we had today. So check that out when you have a minute. And of course, Tannaz, thank you for being here today and sharing all that wisdom with us. I feel like I learned so much even about my own relationships in this episode. So thank you for coming on and joining me today. It was an absolute pleasure to have you here.
Thank you, Petra, for having me on, for asking really amazing questions, and for creating the space for this conversation.
Oh, thank you so much, and take really great care of yourself. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to listen in. If you enjoy the Jōrni Podcast, please support us by subscribing, sharing on social media, and leaving us a review. We appreciate you. And you can find more of The Jōrni on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and our website, thejorni.com. Sending you love and courage, and see you next time.